Welcome to Mystery Conversations, a Bell Cow podcast. I'm Rob Young.
And I'm Michael McBride. We're the people behind Bell Cow Productions.
We're bringing you an encore recording of Minnesota Mystery Night, a live monthly author event held the third Monday of each month at Lucky's 13 in Mendota, Minnesota.
Now just kick back and enjoy.
We really have an unusual pairing tonight. In this corner, one of St. Paul's favorite sons, veteran crime writer David Housewright. And in this corner, movie director and producer Patrick Coyle. David Housewright has authored 31 novels?
33 if you're counting the one coming out in June.
Okay, well then 32.
Just thought I'd throw that out.
We'll compromise at 32. He's won an Edgar Award, 3 Minnesota Book Awards, is a past president of Private Eye Writers of America, has been nominated for more awards than you can shake a stick at, and has been named by the Minnesota Historical Society and the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library as part of Minnesota Writers on the Map, joining such luminaries as Louise Erdrich, Sinclair Lewis, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Maud Hart Lovelace, Laura Ingalls Wilder, August Wilson, William Kent Kruger, and Charles M. Schultz. Wow. He has been called, quote, one of Minnesota's treasured authors, unquote, by no less than the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Quite a recognition since, A, the Strib seldom recognizes any author from Minnesota, and 2, it's the kind of thing that they usually write about you after you're dead. His 32nd book, Them Bones, was released in 2025. Number 33 is Fear the Reaper, is scheduled for release in June 23, 2026. His short stories have won many awards, have been published in such magazines as the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine and True Romance. And on True Romance.
Okay, you want me to tell you that story?
Yeah, in a minute. On top of all that, he is half of the Minnesota literary power couple of David Housewright and Renee Valois. Renee, both of whom live in St. Paul. Patrick Coyle is an entertainment's renaissance man. He is a lead singer in a band called One Hit Wonders. He is a professor of film at Minneapolis College of Art and Design. He is an actor. He is a playwright. He is a producer and director of films and of live performances, and boy, is he busy. His most recently released project, a film adaptation of Thomas Rumreich's novel Unholy Communion. Patrick lives with his wife here in St. Paul, and I guess the last thing we have to do is give him a really warm welcome.
Oh, wow.
And gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Good night, everybody.
So, what do you want to know?
Thank you for watching the trailer. I know it's not really bookish to be talking and looking at film, but here we are. It's an adaptation of a novel, so.
Is it out now?
The movie is out now, yeah. You can rent it on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Fandango, wherever you get your digital movies.
And who wrote the novel?
Dr. Thomas Rumreich wrote the novel. He was a forensic odontologist, so I'm sure crime writers know what that is, right? They identify corpses via their dental work, and so he did that with the St. Paul and Minneapolis police for 20 years. He was also, sadly, the victim, as a boy, a victim of clergy abuse, and so carried that secret around for 50 years, and then it sort of came out with this novel, exploded out of him. And he saw my film, Into Temptation, and contacted me and said, I think you'd be a good person to adapt this novel. Then he said, I think you'd be a good person to direct this film, and that's how that went down.
Now, your first movie, you wrote your first movie. It was based on your book.
My first film was based on a play called Detective Fiction, so I'm a longtime crime aficionado.
When you pick a property, what do you look for?
You know, I don't. All of my films are original screenplays that I wrote. This person sort of sought me out to adapt a novel, and I'd never done that before.
Okay.
And that's why I was asking you if you have had your books optioned, which you told me you have.
This is a painful conversation.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring that up. Let's get a movie made of one of your books. That's what I said.
I had several organizations, producers, that have contacted me about taking both of my series, Mackenzie and Taylor, and turning them into TV series. And I actually was heavily involved in some of this. In one case, we actually broke down the history of all the main characters. And I sent it to them, and everything was fine. Then they told me we're going to meet these guys in New York in February. and you got to be there. You have to be there. You're going to be there, right? And I said, absolutely, I'll be there. And then COVID hit, and I hadn't heard from anybody since. That's not as painful as the other one. My novel, Practice to Deceive, was optioned by Empire Pictures, a guy named Michael Birnbaum. I don't know if you know him. And Harley Payton wrote the script, and they got Brett Ratner to direct. This is before he had his problems. And a guy called me on Tuesday and said, we are greenlit, we're going to make this. And I'm thinking how much my life was about to change, and not just because they're going to hand me a check for $250,000. And then he called me on Thursday and told me that it had been canceled. And the reason it was canceled is because between Tuesday and Thursday, somebody went to Brett Ratner and asked him if he wanted to direct a Hugh Hefner biography, which was never made, by the way. So he decided he was going to put his projects on hold. And the studio goes, no. And Michael told him, I have a new director by Friday. And the studio says, does that new director average $100 million a pop? Mm-hmm. And so they canceled it. And Michael calls me and he tells me this. And you could hear the emotion in his voice. And he was practically in tears. And he announces, Brett Ratner isn't a sail. Brett Ratner is a anchor. And for some sad, pathetic reason, I started laughing. I thought that was hysterical. Now, years later, me and William Ken Kruger, we are chatting with a guy named Lee Goldberg, and Lee Goldberg is involved in movies and TV shows. He worked on the Monk TV series and all that. And we're telling him our stories. In fact, Kruger, they optioned his book, and they were going to turn it into a movie, and they wanted to film it in Ohio. And, stuff like this. And it fell apart, and it never got made. And Goldberg looks at me, and he goes, yeah, what did you guys do the next day? And I said, well, I probably went to work on my next book. And he goes, well, what about all these people who are suddenly out of work because they're not going to make this movie? And I'm going, don't try and make me feel bad, pal. I'm not the one who canceled the movie, right? But that's my experience with Hollywood so far.
That was painful. I wrote a play called Detective Fiction, and it was optioned by Victor Lobel, who directed and produced Touched by an Angel series, if anybody remembers that. He held the option for 4 years, and he kept going, we're going to make this movie, and then he had a heart attack. And he said, I'm retiring, and we're not going to make this movie. And he had an $11 million budget for the film. So I got all the rights back to the film. I adapted it myself, simplified it, and then I made it for $100,000 locally. I had a friend of mine that was a finance guy from my hometown. I was lucky enough to get that film to the Sundance Film Festival. Yeah.
Okay.
The main character of the film was going through a court-mandated sobriety, and so he turns to hard-boiled detective fiction writing to kind of escape a troubled marriage. At the Sundance Film Festival, there was a director's brunch, so there's only 16 films that get selected out of thousands. So it was like winning the lottery. It was ridiculous that I got in. And the chief programmer walked over and put his arm around me, and he said, I'm going through a divorce right now. And shit that came out of your main character's mouth has come out of my mouth. And that's why you're here. And I was like, I'm sorry about your divorce, but I'm also kind of thrilled by it. It's a weird moment. So that's my painful story.
All right.
Riding this thing out for about 4 or 5 years. But all's well that ends well.
Well, we were chatting before about, of course you wrote your plays and then you did this, but film being a collaborative effort, and so many get involved, both good and bad, I would imagine. Some people are not necessarily helpful to making it, and I'm just assuming this, because you get 100 people, you're going to get people whose visions certainly conflict with your own. But in my life, I have 2 people, and one of them's my wife, and, I'll take half of her suggestions. And the other is my editor. And I've been very fortunate with my editor, my publisher, for 26 books with the same house is absurd. So it's not nearly as fraught with conflict that I would think that your business would be.
That's funny. You think it's all conflict. But,
well, no, but I mean, anytime you work with 6 people, much less 100.
Right. You know what? I will say this about the film business is it trickles down, especially the independent film business, is it trickles down from the director. Sure. And I'm so incredibly grateful to these people that are coming together and working for less than what they usually make because it's a low-budget indie film, that are coming together to kind of make my vision happen. The gratitude just seems to kind of I've never had a problem on a film set. I'm grateful and love the people that come to work on my films, and especially the actors too. I think great acting is everything. My wheelhouse is acting. I think the second the acting goes a little wrong in a movie, an audience is kind of, they're like checking their watch and they maybe not even sure why they've fallen out. And so you just can't have a moment of acting that's not truthful. I used to think great writing was the most important component of filmmaking, and it's way up there. But I think acting is even more important. I studied English literature in college and was reading nothing but 18th century literature and Shakespeare and Chaucer. And I went on a trip to Ireland right after I graduated from college, and I spent a month at the Castletown House in just east of Dublin. And Robert Lowell, the famous American poet, had a library there, and one whole wall of his library was detective fiction, was crime, was mysteries. I'd never read mysteries before, and I pulled the first thing off the shelf, and it was Farewell, My Lovely by Raymond Chandler.
Ooh, okay.
And I couldn't put this book down. I was like, this is so good, and if it was good enough for Robert Lowell, it's good enough for me. And I became absolutely hooked on mysteries. And then I moved to Minneapolis, and I was lonely and didn't know anybody, but I lived a block away from Uncle Edgar's and Uncle Hugo's, and I read my way through the bookstore. Just for the first couple of years, I lived in the Twin Cities. It resulted in my first novel, detective fiction. Some things that were going on with me personally and my love for that genre came together, and that's how that story happened. So how much of what you write, David, is personal? I'm sure with 32 novels, there had to be something.
Real life creeps into it, and that things you experience, things that you see, things that you hear, all gets incorporated. I was interviewed for this magazine years ago, and the critic, or the woman who interviewed me, pointed out that all my books are about family. And until she actually said that to me, I didn't know that. I mean, I always was picking what I thought were, whatever appealed to me at the time. I wrote about political corruption, and identity is one of my favorite themes, and things like that. And she says this to me, and I'm like, oh, God, that's true. But I never intended that. I never sat down and said, I want to write through all of these experiences. They just seem to have incorporated themselves without me paying that much attention.
Who's your favorite mystery writer?
Oh,
Top three.
Oh, God. You mean
you can change later.
You mean people I like drinking with when we're at World Mystery Convention?
No, when you're
like
who you like to read? Who are your influences?
I don't really have a. John D. MacDonald comes to mind.
Oh,
he
wow,
wrote
yeah,
to Travis McGee.
Yeah, Travis McGee.
We talked about Lawrence Block. I had the pleasure of knowing Mr. Block. Elmore Leonard, I get to call him Dutch. In fact, as my career has gone, I become more and more a disciple of Elmore Leonard. Become very less descriptive, using dialogue and action to move the story way more than I used to. I remember in one book, I think it was Dearly Departed, I spent a page and a half describing a bar. And now I look at it and I go, what the hell are you thinking? And now I'll write, 2 sentences. It was 90% male, not a gay bar, just a place you wouldn't take your girl. And then I would let you guys decide what that means, what that place looks like, how it felt. And Dutch would do that all the time. He would let the reader fill in the blanks because it wasn't really, unless it was important to the story, unless it was pertinent, he was more than happy to let the reader fill in the blanks. And I find myself doing that more and more as I go along. But I don't really have three. I loved Kurt Vonnegut. I loved Charles Dickens. I love, a lot of non-mystery writers. E.L. Doctorow is probably my favorite writer of all time. And so even though I'm immersed in that culture, I read a lot of other stuff that also influences what I do.
Speaking of
I
other
thought it was a fairly easy question.
Yeah. Speaking of other stuff, David, how did you get published in True Romance?
Okay, you guys know who Tammy Hoag is? Writes thrillers. Well, Tammy used to write romance. And I remember we were sitting around, I don't even remember where now, doing some gathering. And she told me this story. She's telling me about how she wrote romance and she knew the romance writers. And I said something stupid to her. I said, yeah, I think any moron can write romance. And yes, alcohol was involved. And she suggested, in language I dare not repeat right now, that I couldn't do that. So I wrote a short story called The Sultan of Seduction, swear to God. And I sold it to True Romance magazine. And the editor actually called, and she was trying to lobby me to write more stories for her because she said your story sounded like real literature. Okay, all right. So the magazine comes out, and I get about a dozen copies, or a couple of copies anyway, and I go, and Tammy was doing this signing, I think it was Once Upon a Crime in Minneapolis. And I come in, and I show her my story in True Romance magazine. And she goes, oh, I guess you're right. Any moron can write romance.
Nice.
And I had it coming.
So tell us about your most recent books, David.
Well, that brings up a question because we were talking about life experiences working your way into stories, and I find that's very true. For example, I was doing a piece, thinking about doing a story about family legacy. How long do you keep your great-grandfather's name alive? I mean, my God, And I remember I was pacing in my wife's family's lake home. And at the time, they had inherited the family place, 5 siblings. And there was a debate about whether to do it, and there was talk about selling it, and some people wanted to keep it and whatever. And I'm thinking about working all this in. I had no story. And my wife was looking at her computer, and we found out that the Spicer Castle in Spicer, Minnesota had closed down. I've been there several times. I love the place. And the family sold it, and it got torn down, turned into condos or something like that. And click. And that became the book, Something Wicked. Now, sometimes that happens. I was thinking about identity. This is one of my favorite themes. Be careful who you pretend to be, because that's the person you'll become. Now, years ago, I read an article in Boston Globe. Don't ask me what I was doing reading the Boston Globe. And it was about the guy who inspired the movie The Thomas Crown Affair. Now, in real life, what happened was he got out of college, and he started working for a bank, and he was bored out of his mind. And he kept telling his friends how easy it would be to rob this bank. And his friends kept telling him, well, if it's so damn easy, go rob the bank. And so he did. And he walked out with a shopping bag filled with $284,000 in cash. And this was a Friday, 4 o'clock. Says goodbye to the security guard. Hey, I'll see you Monday. Monday comes, he's not there. They find, they go through the footage, they find out he robbed a bank. Cops go to his apartment, poof, he's gone. And he stayed gone for 50 years. Now, they indicted him in absentia, and the reason they did that, and they had him on film so that they could pull that off, was so he didn't show up 7 years later and go, hey, suckers, what's going on? So the U.S. Marshals chased this guy for 50 years and could not find him. And then he died. And something in his obituary alerted the marshals. And I actually called the marshals to try and figure what that was, and they weren't going to tell me. Anyway, they sent agents to the family, and the family confessed that as he lay dying, as he was on his deathbed, he told them he was that guy who inspired the movie. He stole the money, he moved, he got married, he raised a family, he owned a business, pillared the community. Now, I had that article, and I had it in my pocket for years. And I'm going, I have no idea what I'm going to do with that. What I'm going to do, rewrite the Thomas Crown Affair? And then one day I did a book club, and I don't do book clubs. A friend of mine who was in it was an old advertising friend. And she asked me if I would come out, and I said, sure. And the book club was held on a hill in Shoreview. And the hill was circled by houses. And the only way to get on this hill was to cut through some guy's yard. It was owned, and 90% of it was owned by a guy. And he let anybody who wanted to go up there, welcome to it. They put up a pavilion. They had weddings, this sort of thing. But he was getting old. He was going into assisted living. And now all the neighbors were concerned that, The kids are going to sell it to a developer, and why wouldn't they? They don't live there. Click. And that became the book in a Hard Wind. Now, some stories come to me that way. On the other hand, Fear the Reaper, there's a, what they call a boutique winery, a small batch winery near Danbury in Wisconsin. And I'm sitting there with my family. We're going through the tasting menu and all this sort of thing. And there's a guy singing in the corner, and there's a bunch of people sitting there. And I look around and I go, gee, what would happen if a guy came walking onto this veranda with an automatic weapon? That's Fear the Reaper. That's the one coming out in June. So the books come from all kinds of places. They come from a moment in your life. But they all also come from that never-ending question, what if? What if this happened? What if that happened?
That just reminded me of somebody in this room was in one of my movies. Alan Miller. Could you raise your hand, Alan? Yeah. We haven't seen each other probably since, but that just reminded me of sort of the genesis of that story. Alan, I made a film with Kristen Chenoweth and Jeremy Sisto, a couple of really Broadway diva, Kristen Chenoweth, you probably, and 4'10" and 90 pounds and a mountain of talent. And her and Alan got along famously. Alan played a corpse. And you did it really well. That's not easy. For hours to be a corpse, and Alan was who's a brilliant man who taught screenwriting for years and years and years. But your story reminded me of the film was Into Temptation. My dad was studying to be a priest right before World War II, actually, and he was in the seminary for a year, and then he met my mom. One day I started wondering what kind of a priest would my dad have made, because he was kind of a character, sort of a hard-boiled, two-fisted drinking. And I was like, really, priest? And I wrote a scene. I just wrote one scene about how would my dad have handled confession. That was this thing that popped into my brain. I had a lot of time on my hands one day. And I wrote that scene, and it just sort of started to pull me into this direction. And the film became about, a priest and a hooker. It was really, really deeply personal. But my dad, I got a chance to show it to him right before he passed back in 2010. But I got a chance to show it to him right beforehand. And his comment was, "I think you're a good filmmaker. You just don't you don't need to rely on that Effenheimer as often as you do."
Which of your most recent books are best suited for film?
I like that answer, all of them. I don't know. I told you I was a disciple of Elmore Leonard, and I remember I
was going to say, if you're writing like Elmore Leonard, then you're getting pretty cinematic. Those are very dialogue, character-driven books.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do that, but I never think in those terms. I never thought of, as I'm writing, how would this work as a movie? Or would this scene play or anything like that? I've never done that. I like to think all of them would be good movies because I believe very much in pace. I want everything to move, boom, boom, boom. Nothing slows down, nothing, there's no scenes where I'm just padding because I'm talking about his character or some damn thing for 3 or 4 pages. I like to think that every scene moves the book along. So in that regard, it may make a difference, but it's not something I've given much thought to. I've had people tell me some short stories I've written would make great plays. I wrote one called May News Window, and I was told that would make a great 2-act play, but nothing ever came of it. So
I'm just curious if anybody has read books that became films that they think the film was as good as the book. I almost always feel like the book is better than the movie. Do people agree with me on that? Or what are some examples of crime books that have become... I think Hitchcock adapted some stuff that was obviously amazing.
Well, you mentioned that. I mean, for example, The Maltese Falcon, if you read it, and it's a short novel. There was a time when crime novels were about 60,000 words. And then hardcovers came in, and then they increased the word count because they wanted people to think that they're getting their money's worth. They paid the big bucks for hardcover. And so it became 85,000 words. And, of course, romance is still about 60, but sci-fi is, it's more like 80, but fantasy is 150, and we're talking 3 books minimum, that kind of thing.
And any moron can write them.
No. But you read The Maltese Falcon, for example, and the script follows the book very carefully, but there are a couple of chapters that are gone. Gutman's daughter is in the book, and she certainly isn't in the movie. And so you see where the trimming takes place. But
I think like The Big Sleep, Raymond Chandler, the Bogart version is very, very good. Farewell, My Lovely was made, Robert Mitchum, I think, was the perfect person to play Philip Marlowe.
except that they said it in England. What the hell?
Right. And he was also into his 70s when he played the role, a little bit old. But Robert Altman did a version of Raymond Chandler that I thought Elliot Gould played Marlowe. I hated that movie. I hate it because I'm such a devotee of Raymond Chandler I was at the time. I was just like, you just completely missed it. If anybody wants to rebut that, but it's a little bit obscure, possibly. But
I don't agree necessarily that all the books are better than the movies. You talk about crime fiction. I could think of a couple. The Postman always not the Postman.
Good example though.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. Oh God, Frederick McMurray, Barbara Stanwyck.
Double Indemnity.
Double Indemnity. The movie, much better than the book.
That's a good.
The ending
I agree with
of
that.
the book is what? But the movie was much smarter than that.
One of my favorite movies is The Graduate, and the book's not that good.
No.
The movie's amazing.
Call of the Wild?
What'd you
Call
call
it mystery.
The problem with The Call of the Wild is that the main character is the dog. And Hollywood's not going to allow that, where you're literally following the dog through the movie. So you see the movie versions, and everyone from the one with Clark Gable to the one with oh God, what the hell was that guy's name? It doesn't really matter. But they concentrate on the people, and in the book, the people are secondary.
So what's next on your docket, Patrick?
So I just posted, or we just finished Unholy Communion last year, and I was lucky enough to sell it. Independent films get made, and 97% of them don't get sold. So I'm just going to put that out there that we sold the film, and it's available digitally, and I'm proud of that. I've made four independent films, and they've all gotten some distribution. So, but I'm working on a film that's kind of set. I'm sort of exercising all the feelings I have about growing up in the community, the hometown I grew up in, and that's a script called Leavenworth Street, and I'm going to shoot that.
I'm sorry, I can't hear
It's a script called Leavenworth Street, and I'm going to shoot that this spring, summer. Hopefully, funding's going in a really positive direction on that. So that's my next project.
Okay. Do you ever have a couple going on at the same time, or is one all-consuming?
God, my blood just ran cold when you asked that. One is so all-consuming. I make a film every 5 years. I mean, it's you give your life over to it for several years. I was talking to David beforehand, and it's very similar. I'm a writer-director, so I sit down like David all by myself and in a room, and I write fade in, and that's how I start every screenplay. And I spend months on the script, and then I move out towards my wife, and she's the first person that reads the screenplay. And then I bring a producer on board, and then I start bringing money people on board, and then we get a green light, and then there's casting, and you crew it up, and pretty soon you're working with 100 people, and it's just like a nomadic film community that just sort of goes from location to location over the course of 5 or 6 weeks, and you don't sleep much, and it's really exciting, and it's exhilarating, and then afterwards you go into post-production, and the numbers just start to go like this. So that you start all by yourself, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of 100 people, and you come back down to the very end and you go, now I got to sell it. So,
have you ever had to add characters not originally in the book, as in The Road to Perdition?
you mean when adapting the novel, did I add characters?
Yes.
Because I've only adapted one novel, and that's the trailer you just saw. Yes, I did add some characters, and I cut some characters. And the writer I read the book, and this might make some people's blood run cold in this room, but the writer gave me carte blanche to adapt the film his novel the way I felt it needed to be adapted for the screen. And so his novel was really, really kind of intensely, obsessively about forensic details, which after a couple chapters got a little old. And I kind of made it more about the relationships and the psychology of the friendship and of the murder and of the betrayal and of the trauma that the main character, the audience finds out who the killer is in Unholy Communion in the first scene and knows who the killer is the whole film. The main character does not. And so there's that interesting dichotomy is going on. That's not the way the book was written. And he read my screenplay, and he walked away for a couple of days. And then he came back and said, I really like it. I've got 2 notes for you. And I went, I'm going to be able to work with this guy. So good question. Kathy has a question.
David, you are beloved by so many people in this room.
Well, thank you.
You are, and admired and respected. And I wonder, what haven't you written that is still on your heart that you know you want to write? And maybe not your next book, but what haven't you written that you hope to still write?
As I said earlier, the ideas for the books come from everywhere. But there isn't any one thing that I have that I want to get down on paper, but I haven't for some reason. I'm reminded of something that Paul Simon once said about his music, that after the first few years, he started writing songs just to write the songs because he liked the subject, or he liked them, he got a melody in his head, or he got a phrase that he wanted to incorporate in a lyric, whatever. And he said it was much more interesting, much more fun after that. The first couple of years, he was writing his heart. He was writing these things that were important to him, that he wanted to get on paper, about whatever subject was important to him. And once he got through that, he was better. My first few books, the first couple of Mackenzies, the first Holland Taylor novels, for example, a lot of that came from personal angst, or whatever you want to call it. But once I got past that, I had a lot more fun writing the books because, like I said, the one I wrote that's out right now called Them Bones is about the black market for dinosaur fossils. And the reason that came about was because I finished my last book, and whenever I do this, I have this period where I walk around the house in big circles for 3 weeks thinking that's it, I'm done, no more stories to tell, no more books to write. And my son, who was over at dinner, said, you should write about dinosaurs. I said, well, what do you mean about dinosaurs? Write about a dinosaur. And I'm like a real dinosaur? And he goes, yeah. I go, dinosaurs walking the earth? And he goes, yeah. I said, shut up. Now, shortly after this, I was at the World Mystery Convention, and we were in Long Beach. And I'm sitting at a table with a bunch of writers, Gary Phillips. Great writer, love this guy, big guy. I mean, you could roller skate on this guy. I played basketball once with him, and I hit him, and I just crumbled to the ground. He's looking down at me, goes, you okay, House? No, I'm not. Anyway, so he's sitting there, so what are you up to? What do you got? I said, I thought I'd write about dinosaurs. And he looks at me, goes, has it come to that? And I go, what's right? And he says, you're gonna write dinosaur porn? And I'm like, there's such a thing as dinosaur porn? And how do you know this, Gary? And it just became a kind of a running gag for a while. And as I'm flying home, I'm using my phone. I'm not supposed to, but I'm looking up dinosaurs. First of all, to find out, is there such thing as dinosaur porn? And there is.
Wow.
Okay. But things haven't gotten that bad yet, so we're good. And then I just got into the bit about the business, and I read this article about these A-list actors, Russell Crowe, Leonardo DiCaprio, Nicolas Cage, a couple of other guys who got into a bidding war for the skeleton, the skull of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Don't hold me to that. It might have been a different dinosaur. And DiCaprio won. And then the cops, after he paid for it, the cops came and confiscated it because it turned out it was stolen. I don't know if he got his money back, and I'm starting to go, oh, dinosaurs. And that became Them Bones. And that's how I work now. I don't sit there about what's personal, what do I have to say. I just come up with ideas based on what I see and what I hear about what a friend of mine calls the out of whack event that makes you stop and go, wait a minute. And this is where I'm at.
Talk about perseverance in writing, because that really is important. I know my first novel, David Housewright, looked at it, and when he gave it back to me, I said, "What do you think?" He said, "I think you should go into screenwriting." So I said, "I've already failed at that, so..." But you have to persevere, and you both would know that, so talk about that.
William Kent Kruger and I once did an event together at the reopening of the Roseville Public Library, which is one of the most busy libraries. And they shut it down, they remodeled and whatever. So they had this grand opening. And we were doing the event, and a writer who was in the audience asked, "What's the difference between us, Kent and I, and all these other people who are trying to write books?" And I told them, "We will finish the book. Come hell or high water, we will finish the book." But I met a lot of guys who will tell me, yeah, they started working on a book, but, the job's a hassle, and they're having problems with kids and health issues and whatever. The day my father died, I wrote 3 pages. They sucked, but I wrote them. That's the difference. We're going to finish the book. He's going to finish the screenplay.
Yeah,
this
that's
is
true.
going to happen.
We used to call it the completion theory. I'm very picky about what I start, because when I start it, I finish it, exactly what David was just talking about. But one of my favorite stories, another crime writer, James Lee Burke. I don't know if you probably love his stuff. James Lee Burke's first novel, he submitted it over 100 times. He had over 100 rejections on his first novel, and then he got... What book was that?
Oh, God.
Oh, my God. Denzel Washington was in the movie. Come on, somebody help me out. Blue. I'll get back to you. Anyway, it's brilliant. It's a great, fabulous book, and the movie was Jennifer Beals, Denzel Washington.
Okay, wait. Not James Lee Burke.
Carl Franklin.
It wasn't James Lee Burke.
Oh, that's Walter Mosley. Never mind. That's Walter Mosley. I mixed
Devil
them
in a
up.
Blue Dress.
Devil in a Blue Dress. Thank you. That's Walter Mosley. But James Lee Burke's first novel, 100 rejections. So I love Walter Mosley, too.
I met Walter Mosley.
I met Walter Mosley, too.
He was the first guy to shake my hand when I won my Edgar.
I met him at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we identity. But yours is far more impressive.
I don't know. I didn't get a chance to chat with him over chat.
No, we sat down over, because that was one store down from Uncle Edgar and Uncle Hugo's. You all know that is on Chicago Avenue in South Minneapolis. Fabulous mystery bookstore.
All right.
And Walter Mosley was reading one of his novels there, and he took a break and went to Kentucky Fried Chicken next door, and I followed it. Because my first my play had just been optioned, and I wanted to ask him about Hollywood, and he was the coolest, most generous guy I've ever met in my life.
Absolutely.
Hi. I just wondered, some people, whether it's a book or a movie, like whodunits.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. There's till maybe a final twist at the end. Other people like a mystery that's like you just did, that, okay, we know it, but there's a lot we don't know, and how's it going to end?
Right.
What makes you decide, or what do you like to do, and why?
I can answer quickly. There are whodunit authors, like I discovered Agatha Christie, who I think is just one of my absolute all-time favorites. That's kind of more in the whodunit category genre, I would say. But I'm so much more interested in the people and the conflicts and the relationships in anything that I write. And so I'm going to flesh out the people and flesh out the truth of the world before I, if a whodunit kind of crops up. Into Temptation kind of has a little bit of a whodunit ending, but it was just this organic thing that needed to happen to close out the story of this relationship that ensued between these two people that never really met. We find out they knew each other as children, but they didn't meet in the course of but their lives became intertwined, and they became obsessed with each other. And that stuff is so much more interesting to me than just kind of the red herrings and the find out who did it.
I tend to agree. I've always maintained the best crime novels are about more than who done it. They're about more than who killed Mr. Body in a library with a candlestick. We mentioned Dutch Leonard, Elmore Leonard, and he never wrote a mystery in his life. All of his crime novels are about the characters committing the crime and catching the criminal and whatever. It's never been a locked room mystery, that sort of thing. I kind of run the gambit. I mean, I have some that are very strictly whodunit. I have some that are why done it. And, In Fear the Reaper, for example, we catch the criminal in the first 4 pages. Now we're trying to figure out who the target was before somebody tries again. And that's basically what the book's about. And so it's really the story you're trying to tell. What is it you want people to know when you close the cover? And sometimes it was the butler, and sometimes it's completely different. Again, it depends on the story you want to tell.
I think there's some writers that like Ross MacDonald is another writer, even John D. MacDonald. But Ross MacDonald especially, they said he wrote the same novel 40 times.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm positive he sat down to start writing something and had no idea where it was going. None. He's such a good writer. I actually enjoy the journey of most of his books. I really do. Raymond Chandler's the same way. You get to the end of it and you go, oh my God, these characters were so fun. They're so richly funny, usually in a very dark, kind of sardonic way. But I get to the end of them and go, not a lot really happened. And there was not really a payoff, and I still loved this book. So
yeah. You read Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall,
Big Sleep.
The Big Sleep. There are things that take place in this book and in the movie that are never explained. Like who killed the chauffeur and drove the car into the river? It's never explained in the book. It's never explained in the movie. Why the hell did they even have that scene? But there it is.
But the general, who because of health reasons has to stop drinking, hires an Irishman to do his drinking for him.
Sure. So
That's early in the book, and I went, all right, I'm in. There's a number of relatives of mine that would have signed up for that job.
In the end of The Big Sleep, for example, he gets hired by the general to do all of this, and he never tells the general. So the general can sleep the big sleep, so he can't worry about those things. So he can just wait in his canopied bed until his time is over. Meanwhile, Philip Marlowe drives to the nearest bar and has a double scotch. It didn't do him any good. That's the last line of the book. You see what Chandler's trying to do, but a lot of the stuff he wrote didn't make a hell of a lot of sense. All right.
One of the great mysteries of our lifetime is why hasn't David Housewright been on the New York Times top 10 bestseller list?
I have often wondered that myself.
In fact, the first time you and I met, I interviewed you, and that was one of the things that you said. I said, what would you really like to accomplish? And you said, I'd like to be on the New York Times bestseller list. I have figured out what you need to do. Just from tonight.
All right.
You need another name. No, not you. The two you've got are good, but you need a third name. Because I looked at all the people who are, or most of the people who are in that list of luminaries. F. Scott Fitzgerald, Maud Hart Lovelace, Laura Ingalls Wilder, William Kent Kruger. We need a third name, House.
How about just a hyphen?
Yeah.
David House, right?
Oh, that might work.
My middle name is Wayne.
David Wayne.
David Wayne Housewright.
Ooh, I like it.
I do not use my middle name, and
Serial killer.
Demand that you all forget it before you walk through the door.
Well, I think we should, from the floor, suggest other ones. Any ideas for a third name for House? Gentlemen, it has been a delightful hour. Thank you very much for spending the time with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you David Housewright, Patrick Coyle.
Can I make just one small?
You can.
I'm so sorry that I have this little platform, and I hope this is okay, but things are tough in Minneapolis right now. And there's a website called Stand with Minnesota, and it's got a bunch of vetted places where people are really struggling and where people need some help. If anybody is compelled to want to help people in Minneapolis, Stand with Minnesota is a great website to go to. That's all. Thank you for that.
Well, it deserves more than that. Patrick spends a lot of time on the streets.
I do.
Not because he's homeless, but because he is an active advocate for those who have very few advocates these days. And thank you for your effort and your work. I also know that there are churches and lots of organizations where help can be channeled to those who have basically gone to the ground to protect themselves. And so if you're running into long lines at places like restaurants and grocery stores, or if you're your favorite Mexican restaurant is closed in the last week, those people are still there and they need help. So please reach out and do that. That's all for tonight, folks. The books oh, wait, no, it's not all, because Patrick, once again, please repeat where we can see.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Unholy Communion, it's kind of wherever you rent your digital movies. I'd say the two easy ones are Amazon Prime, Apple TV, YouTube Movies, Google Movies, Fandango. Those are places where you can get it. So, but if you remember Amazon Prime or Apple TV, then the title is Unholy Communion. Thank you.
I actually have one last question or a request from each of you. We have a wonderful, our Gabby is an aspiring author, writer, and she's a senior in high school. And it seems like the two of you are perfect to ask to please give her a short but a piece of wisdom or as she looks to her future, because we're all part of her future. So can you just give her a word or two?
Oh, fantastic. Where is she?
Right over here.
Yay. It's Gabby?
It's Gabby. She checked each of you in this evening. She's one of our assistants. So
awesome. You want to go first? I can go if you want.
Words of wisdom? God.
These aren't necessary. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. You go.
You know, why don't you go ahead
okay.
so I can think of something important.
This goes back a little bit to something Alan said about perseverance, but I want to say that I have received the answer no so many times in my career when it's like, you can't make that movie, you can't raise that money, you can't get that actor, that story is outrageous. And I really got to a place where I thanked people. There's things to learn from feedback, but you do not ever listen to no, because you can and you will. I can tell just by looking at you right now that you can and you will. Seriously. So that perseverance piece is seriously important, but it's also just absolute unequivocal belief in yourself, and I know you will.
I really don't have much to add to that, because I think that's basically true. I mean, if you have the talent and you're going to put the work in, you can do it. I was rejected by the finest publishing houses in the country. The publishing house, you want another story? I ended up in a small press called Countryman Press. They had an imprint called Foul Play Press. And all they did was publish, they would get the United States rights to English authors like Peter Lovesey and print their books here. And I ended up with them. I was their only American writer, and that year I won the prize, and everything took off. All you need is one yes, and then God knows where you're going to end up. You might end up at Lucky Sevens or whatever.
Okay, everybody, let's give these two gentlemen a great round of applause.
Thanks for joining us for this encore presentation for Minnesota Mystery Night.
Our thanks to Louis DeMars, the sound engineer who captured the conversation in the first place, and to Lucky's 13 in Mendota for hosting the event.
We also want to thank the sponsors who help keep the mystery alive: Midwest Mystery Works, Twin City Sisters in Crime, and Once Upon a Crime Bookstore.
And if you'd like more Minnesota Mystery Night, it lives on as Masters of Mystery Radio Hour, airing on stations across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and South Dakota. Check your local station, and if Masters of Mystery is not on their schedule, reach out and ask them to add it.
For the current schedule, reservations, and all the latest details, head to mnmysterynight.com.
If you like this podcast, check out the full network of podcasts Bell Cow has to offer at bellcowproductions.com.
In addition to Mystery Conversations, we have Story Lab, Field Notes, the Author Roundup, and who knows what else we'll cook up.
Thanks for listening. Keep following the clues.
And while you're following the bell cow back to the barn, try not to step in anything.